We're in AD 30, it's event 12, and Jesus is answering those questions that are posed in Matthew 24, Luke 13, and, Mark 13, and Luke 21. Let me read them to you. First of all, Matthew 24:3. As he was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when will these things happen, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" In Mark 13:4 it says, "Tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign when all of these things are going to be fulfilled?" In Luke 21:7, they questioned him, saying, "Teacher, when, therefore, will these things happen, and what will be the sign when these things are about to take place?" Now, the first question we have to ask ourselves is, what was in the disciples' mind at the time they asked these questions? Were they responding to chapter 23 of Matthew, where he said, "You're not going to see me anymore"? And then when he responded and said that as they were oogling and ogling over the temple, the question is, when will the temple be torn down and not one stone not be on another? So maybe it was both. Maybe both of those thoughts were in their minds. They all happened in a short sequence. So now we have to ask ourselves the question not only about what their intentions were, but what did it mean when Jesus answered? Should we take chapter 24 and 25 of Matthew and these parallel passages in Mark and Luke in chronological order? That is, as written, as being historically in sequence. Or should we take them as long and short prophecies? And should they be long and short prophecies chronologically or non-chronologically? Well, I have consulted a number of commentaries, looked at a number of people that I really respect in their interpretation of Scripture, and I would say to you that it is not chronological. It's not chronological in its sequence, and it's not chronological in the events in history. Second part that we want to look at is this short-term prophecy or is this long-term prophecy? And my answer to that is, it's not short and it's not long, it's both. All right, so what were my sources? What were some of the ones that I really thought had a handle on this passage of Scripture? One is John Phillips, and the other one is the Life Application Bible, and of course my own personal study Bible, which is the Open Bible. So what is the short term and what is the long term prophecies involved here? Well, the short term is the destruction of the temple. Surely Jesus didn't want to ignore that question. When will the temple be torn down? When will there be not one stone upon another? And again, one of his answers in this long answering deals with this generation shall not pass away until they see all these things. Well, the current generation would see the destruction of the temple. The generation at the time of all of the signs that he's going to give would see the long-term end of all of these prophecies. And some would see in between. So what do we have here? We have what John Phillips calls 3 sermons in one. He deals with the Gentiles, chapter 24, verses 4 through 14, both short and midterm. He deals with the Jews in verses 15 through 31, almost all long-term. However, there is the short-term answer about the temple. And then the rapture of the church, John sees as verses 43 through 44, as he deals with the church in verses 32 through 51. And you say, well, why would he break it down into Gentiles, Jews, and the church? Well, because there were 3 distinct groups here. He was answering the question about the Jewish nation. He was answering the question about the church, which hadn't even been established yet. And he was dealing with the Jews in the long-term picture as well as short-term. In chapter 25, John Phillips sees that the end times, the virgins in chapter 25, verses 1 through 13, is the nation of Israel, a warning to them. And the parable of verses 14 through 18 also represents the church, and this has to do with the talents. So let's unfold this thing over the next several days and try to see if we agree with Phillips and perhaps as many of the points of the Life Application Bible as well. Remember, as I stated yesterday, and I hope you'll remember that, first of all, no one knows the day or the hour. Okay? We've got to accept that. Second of all, we need to be sure that we realize that there is a warning to us here. A warning to continue to be about God's business and be sure we belong to Him, that we are true believers. And thirdly, I think it's very important for us to remember that no one has the absolute final answer on this section of Scripture, because we have three groups of people, which I respect all three groups, that believe in a pre-tribulation rapture. They believe in a second coming, that is, Jesus literally coming to earth and ruling and reigning for 1,000 years. And we have a group that believes that the rapture occurred in the middle of the tribulation, and a group that believes that it all ended in the rapture occurs at the end of the tribulation. So we have pre-tribulation, mid-tribulation, and end of tribulation, rapture of the church. But they all seem to believe in the rapture of the church. Now, the next thing that we need to think about here as we think about this passage of Scripture is the incredibleness, if you will, I don't know if that's a good word or not, but the incredible fact that the temple would be torn down. Jerry Vines, in his commentary on this section of Scripture, says that this is beautiful marble, some as much as 100 tons. That's 200,000 pounds of marble, 40 feet long by 18 feet wide. Some of this marble still exists and is now what they call the Wailing Wall. And we need to understand that there are definitely three sections of Scripture here. We have the section of Scripture which deals with the tribulation. We have a section of Scripture that deals with the coming of Christ. And then a section that deals with the warning to all of us, both believers and non-believers, both Jew and Gentile. It's an incredible section of Scripture. I hope that you'll take some time to study it, but I want you to understand, in its own words, it says, don't worry. You see, although I'm a premillennialist, that is, I believe the church gets raptured out before the tribulation, I'm also a panmillennialist. You say, well, what is a panmillennialist? Well, a panmillennialist says that he knows that God's grace is sufficient even if we have to go through the tribulation, and everything's going to pan out all right. And I know that's true. God will give us the grace and the ability to withstand the tribulation if we must go through it. But I believe that God lifts us out before the tribulation. And that's my thought for the day. Stay tuned for some additional comments on this section of Scripture. It is rich and it is worth looking at because it is the future and it is truth. And the truth will set you free.